Hi, Sonal.
Hey Neetu, how are you?
Good. How are you? All
I'm
right.
good.
I think we can get started today.
Yes.
So, quick introduction on myself. My name is Neetu Walker. I am the Sales and Partner Enablement Lead for Commerce Services at Adobe. Today, we are joined by Sonal Puri, the CEO of WebScale, and also Michael Harvey, the CTO of Quora. The session title for today is Five Things Every Merchant Should Know About Developing on PWA. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and let both Sonal and Michael take it away.
Thanks, Neetu. Hey, Michael.
Do you want to go first, Sonal?
Yeah, let's do it. I can see the slides. Hey, everyone. So much for taking the time. This is a really interesting session. And a little background to the session. Um, we hosted last year at MA Connect, we did a session on headless. And apparently it was one of the more popular sessions because it's a topic that's close to all of our hearts of making our sites faster and more secure and getting them out there and sort of, building the new technology stack. So we were asked to redo the session. We thought, what better way to do it with our favorite partner, Quora, and all the work that we've done together with them on PWA and headless deployment. So this session is a very hands-on session that we put together, and it kind of brings you behind the scenes on what you need to know to develop a PWA, both from a merchant perspective as well as an agency perspective. And Michael's been kind enough to share some deep case studies that we've done, and it's a good summary of what you can do to build a PWA, and then from WebScale's point of view, what you need to do to actually deploy and make it successful. So um, expect some fun stuff. Need the next slide, please. Thank you. So PWAs are an evolution, not a revolution. There's a lot of talk out there that monolithic applications are dead and everything's going PWA and headless and so on and so forth. And neither Quora nor WebScale believe that. And all the case studies that we've seen, all the merchants we've worked with, it's been a journey, and it's subtle, it's slow, sometimes it's fast, but it's an evolution. And you start off with a vision of where you want to get to, whether it's just paid speed or it's deploying an app-like experience or something in between. And that's how we sort of recommend we go through this journey. Need the next slide. Awesome. So let's talk about some of the more basic elements of what we're seeing in the industry. So we're obviously seeing digital leading commerce. I mean, the pandemic and all of its challenges have led to tremendous growth across the world. E-commerce is leading that growth. It's starting to settle down a little into more reality, but the big boost that we got and the habits that have changed for consumers really bring us into the new world of what to expect. So there's a lot more spending, which makes all of us really happy, because whether it's a merchant and their customer, or it's the agency, or it's technology providers like WebScale, or everything in between, we're all benefiting from this massive boost. It's about time. We've all been waiting for a while for this boost to come, and it's here now. Interestingly enough, and I can tell you from personal experience, my travels in India and our team members that work out of India, that in the new world, it's all mobile. Everybody has a mobile device, a smartphone. Everybody's shopping online, using their mobile devices. It's not so much broadband to the home in these regions. It's more the experience that you get on your device. And what does that mean? Well, that means security. That means speed. That means the experience itself, and so much more. So the new world is mobile first, and we've all recognized that. PWAs are a big part of that story. Half the world is online and shopping. I mean, people's grandmas that resisted, our kids. I mean, it's funny. Even my son refuses to go to restaurants anymore. He wants to do everything on DoorDash, and that has changed the world for all of us, and how we experience, whether it's food or clothing or everything in between. The world is evolving into digital, which is great. It makes us super happy. Need the next slide. So what are we seeing across our customer base? We saw this massive push before the pandemic where it was all about acquiring new customers. Let's get as many new customers, new eyeballs. I don't know if you all remember, but in the late 90s and 2000s, it was all about eyeballs, and everybody's value was based on eyeballs. We kind of got into the same world, I'd say in 2019 and even the beginning of 2020, where it was all, let's get more and more customers. And then the world started to change and say, wait a second, I can get all these customers by giving them all these great deals, but how do I make them stick? How do I make them come back? Because the cost of acquiring a new customer was incredibly high, but the cost of retaining that customer was evolving, and people tend to just get the biggest deal that you offer on your website and then go elsewhere. The sense of loyalty was reducing. So the brand started to focus on more customer retention, which meant the customer experience became more and more important. Their security, the speed to maintain search engine rankings, to be found and then to stay found became critical, or has become critical. The requirement to be affordable. So while you're spending all this time to acquire customers and retain customers, if your ability to run your site and your experience is not affordable, one of these aspects is going to put you out of business, and that became pretty critical. And then the innovative side of it, right? Like the speed of going to market, the speed of deploying new features and functions, and allowing customers to experience your, whether it's a one-page checkout, or it's a new couponing system, or it's a new widget, or it's a new sort of experience of trying out clothes on the fly. These kinds of innovations come with the use of microservices or API or cloud or headless, or using a CMS and other packaged business capabilities that you can bring to bear. So we started seeing all these themes come together through the pandemic and now beyond, and they're here to stay. And that is something for all of us to keep in mind. And I know this is a message that all of us on this session believe, and we want to continue to believe, and we want to continue to embrace. So there's this world of, is the e-commerce monolith dead? And we're like, no, that's not happening. And there is use cases where it makes perfect sense. It's here to stay. And we're all very, very committed to it. Now, what is the evolution? We talked about the evolution versus revolution of everything's going from monoliths to headless, and it's microservices, and that's what's happened. No, that's never the case, because one, the technology life cycles in commerce are not that fast, and secondly, the complexity of these sites and the experience that you build is unique, and no one wants to redo it every 2 years. So it's here to stay. It's not going away. It has this benefit of being all under one roof. It's easy to manage. The operational overhead of running a monolith like a Magento 1.x is much easier, much lower. Testing is easier because all the components are in one place. There's an ecosystem of developers, a lot of which are on this call, that really understand the nuances of running these monolithic platforms. And they talk seamlessly to other platforms. So you've got some green screen ERP system, you already have the connectors built. There's an entire ecosystem that sits next to the developers that are building these plugins and are building these connections, so that we can enable that seamless conversation between CMS, ERP, CRMs, other platforms. And it's a proven way of doing it. So the risk is very, very limited in going this route. And that's why we're big believers in, the e-commerce monolith is not going anywhere. And the fear around it and the concerns around it are, this community and communities like this need to stay together and stay where we're committed to making them successful. And then to fix the issues, there are inherent issues with using these monoliths, whether it's speed of experience and so on. We want to fix those issues, not throw the baby out with the bathwater, if analogies are a thing. Neeta, next slide, please. Great. So the way that we see it, it's not an all or nothing. The shift to headless is creating tremendous opportunities. We all want to benefit, whether it's technology providers like WebScale, whether it's agencies like Cora, whether it's developers that are working closely internally with merchants or externally through larger agencies. There are skill sets that can have these developers retain their expertise and become leaders in this new world of headless, which is coming. It's not that it's never going to come. We can always sit and continue to do what we're doing, because what brought us here is not going to take us into the next generation of commerce, and we all want to win. So it's not just an enterprise play. There are opportunities for the community, whether it's 1x, 2x, the enterprise platforms, the community platforms across multiple systems. It's not an all or nothing, and I'll let Michael comment on that a little bit more, because I think he's more on the front line of seeing this shift even more than we are. We sort of enable the shift by providing the technology stack and the infrastructure, but he's sort of building it and having those conversations with merchants and guiding them in one way or the other. Michael, do you have any additional color here?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, when I get into my section, I'll be able to just talk about how some of the opportunities that have been created. And here at Cora, we still have a thriving traditional Magento backend, traditional Magento front end, plus all of the new skill sets around PWA, so React and various flavors of JavaScript like Node and things like that. So this evolution is creating tremendous opportunities for everyone in the Magento ecosystem to participate in.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Needs the next slide. Great. So why go headless, right? You want to go headless because there's a lot of dependency. The amount of times you want to roll out new flavors of what you're trying to build, the amount of times you want to innovate, you want to excite your consumers, you want to roll out new front-end technology, whether it's a single-page app or it's a progressive web app. You want the flexibility in user experience. You want users to sort of have the benefit of whatever, whether it's buy now, pay later, or it's some new connector. You want faster performance. Google is probably one of the leading reasons why a lot of merchants are running towards either having a theme that really changes your life, or putting a PWA front end, or sometimes doing both. There's innovation involved, like we said, getting into a more Mach-like system, MACH, the microservices and API and such delivery, and then making it future-proof. Because in the future, you decide you want a different shopping cart, you can pull it out and plug in a new shopping cart. You decide you want a different payment structure, you can do that. Gives you the flexibility to innovate faster and have your users get a better experience, which then leads to what we talked about earlier, which is customer retention, really important. It is still very complex, so it's not like, this is not the easy button. And any merchant that comes to you and says, let's just go headless because that's the easy button, this is not the easy button. It is complex and it's different complexity. And I think what changes with going to headless is you need a group of expertise that are unique, that are different, that are more than what we have currently in the system. It's agency resources, developer resources really need to grow. And it's not that, say you're a PHP developer, all of a sudden you can do all of these things. No, you still need to be that, and then you need to grow into more and try to do different things and sort of evolve your own expertise. DevOps resources, I think this is the part that's just impossible to support all of these pieces unless you come at it with a bottoms-up DevOps philosophy, which is where WebScale really succeeds, because we push our merchants to be that CI/CD capable, to be that that intensity right from day one on how you want to build and deploy applications, and then work closely with our partner like Cora to make sure that they're on the same page with us. And now this new world of headless just is as seamless as we were used to having under the same roof with monolithic applications. Need the next slide, please. There's a headless landscape. There are so many logos here. There are so many interesting companies that are coming to market with new ways of doing things. It's a very exciting time in this landscape. And it's a very exciting time in the industry, right? Because think about it. If the industry was not expanding and our total addressable market was just not exploding, new merchants would not come in. New companies with this technology stack would not enter. They would not raise large rounds of financing to be able to deliver this new vision of what everyone's trying to do. But the interesting thing is that this landscape is still, it still involves e-commerce platforms like our favorite Magento. It still involves having security and delivery, where companies like Akamai and WebScale play and provide that expertise. It still has the need for a composable stack, and it's not an all or nothing. Some of the composable stack players will say you have to move entirely to this stack. You don't have to. You can actually pick and choose and say what makes sense. You can go the front end optimization route. You can either go full stack CDN, or you can say, I'm just going to get a small piece of the front end to be accelerated, which is CDN-esque, but not the entire, solution. Go the route of PWA frameworks, and Cora is, one of the leaders in the space. There's a number of other partners that we work closely with to kind of bring those PWA frameworks to market. But it's how do these pieces all come together? That's the genius. For a developer to go out and say, I'm going to, build a headless solution, I'm just going to pick and choose across all these. You have to think it through. You have to have an agency like a Cora that really understands how to do it. You have to have a partner like a WebScale, and there's plenty of other names on these slides that can bring all those pieces together. So your entire workflow from from sort of design to test to deploy, and then to redesign and to rebuild is in a seamless experience. And it's really important to figure out those pieces. And then, of course, you've got the plug and play package business capabilities that are easy and all API enabled. That's the common theme across all these is serious API enablement. But that's the landscape. We do multi-cloud delivery and deployment and security for pretty much any one of the pieces you see here. Really, really excited about what we bring to market. Next slide, Neetu.
So I will jump in here. So Sonal really did a great job there painting kind of the landscape of what's going on in our industry, why there's so much excitement around this, what some of the opportunities are, some of the challenges. And what I'd like to get into for our next topic here is why is this happening, and why are progressive web apps in general, and then PWAs for Magento, Adobe Commerce in particular, why is that such an area of growth and opportunity for everyone? Just by way of introduction, my name is Michael Harvey. I'm Cora's CTO. I've been here for 13 years on the software side of e-commerce, and that pretty much is the period of time over which Magento just exploded onto the scene commercially. And our growth has been very tightly coupled with the tremendous growth that Magento, now Adobe Commerce, has experienced. And Sonal also mentioned our partnership. I think Cora and WebScale have done well over a dozen launches together now. And in particular, the last several headless deployments that we've done have been together with WebScale, and we're actually going to talk about a couple of those a little bit later on. And so it's a great example of that ecosystem effect that Sonal was talking about, where you need that partnership between the merchant, between a solution provider like Cora, and then a technology provider like WebScale, who ultimately manifests what you've built to the world and make sure that it's performing well and ticking all of those boxes that customers expect. So we can go on to the next slide. So I'm sure everybody on the call already is familiar with PWAs, but I want to linger for just a second because it's important to make sure that everybody shares a common understanding of what we're talking about here. So I like to start with the W in the PWA acronym, which is web. And so these are just websites. And this is a point that sometimes people miss, that PWAs are websites that are built using JavaScript, CSS, HTML, same technology stack that has powered the modern web for the past 2 decades. And so this is really important because it means things like all of the content that is in a PWA is discoverable by search engines. And this is one of the reasons why they're very SEO friendly. The progressive part is that the PWA, because of the way it's coded, because of the way that the actual standard works under the hood, means that a PWA can take progressive advantage of the device and the browser that it's running in. And the classic example that we like to talk about is if I'm on a desktop, maybe I don't have access to a GPS or a camera. On a mobile device, I do. And so I progressively can take advantage of those capabilities. And so obviously the experience that is being offered on a watch or on a smart speaker is going to be very different than what can be offered on a full-featured supercomputer called a smartphone riding around in people's pockets. And then finally, the app piece is also important, but people tend to go right to that. The app piece just means that a PWA can, it doesn't have to, but can mimic a lot of the functionality and behaviors that we associate with native apps, but without all the overhead of having to maintain separate code bases and being locked up behind an app store. So Alex Russell, the lead engineer at Google, who really helped promulgate the PWA standard, he has a great quote about all of this. He actually has a couple, but one was, progressive web apps were just a technology in search of a good name. And so here's that name. The other one is PWAs are just websites that took all the right vitamins. And I think those are very pithy remarks that capture this. So we can go to the next slide. So here are the marquee benefits that we like to call out when we're educating our prospects and clients on PWAs, and why at this point we do agree with the analyst at Forrester who says it is wrong to build a new website that is not a PWA today. And we feel that for most merchants, whether B2B, B2C, direct to consumer, whatever the business model, that PWA needs to be on their roadmap. And if it's not, it needs to be given serious consideration. So when we're talking about kind of the standout features of a PWA and why they deliver such a compelling user experience, these are some of the headline capabilities that we'll call out. So one of their attributes that's enabled by the service worker, which is what ultimately makes a PWA, is that they can continue to work when they're offline or on a very slow connection, just like an app. And so if somebody is interacting with a PWA and they suddenly lose connectivity going through a tunnel on the subway or something like that, they are still able to interact with the site rather than getting the dinosaur of death. There is no internet connectivity error. Adding to home screen, there's a workflow on iOS and on Android that allows you to add an icon for the PWA to your home screen so that it sits just along all of your other app icons and launches just like another app does. And what's interesting about a PWA is once it has been added to your home screen and you launch it, even though it's running in a browser, none of the browser tooling is visible anymore. So it just looks, behaves, smells like a native app. Google has research showing that the conversion rate requesting or prompting people to download a PWA app icon to their home screen is much higher than trying to get people to go to an app store and download an app and then install it that way. Geolocation is a great use case. I now have GPS on my mobile device, so I could do things like send somebody a push notification when they're near one of my stores. I can do geofencing types of things. I can let people know when items have shipped. I can personalize the experience. So I know that this user is in Phoenix, I'm going to show them swimsuits, and that user is in New Hampshire, I'm going to show them umbrellas, things like that. And then finally, camera access is a really important one, and the use cases here just proliferate. So we have QR code scanning, we have visual search, we have augmented reality, which may sound far-fetched, but we already have clients who want to be able to do things like display flooring or furniture items in your own living room, let's say. And to do that, you need to have that camera access. So these are just some of the standout features of a PWA that we like to call out. So if we go to the next slide, all of that aside, and Sonal mentioned this, the thing that most merchants are coming to us with out of the gate when they're starting to think about PWA is just speed. And so we probably all know that back in August of last year, Google updated their search algorithms to really prioritize elements of site performance that they felt really captured the user experience, and they wanted to quantify various metrics that they could look at that would help assess whether a particular mobile site was delivering a good user experience to an end user or not. So these metrics are called Core Web Vitals. There's 3 of them. Largest contentful paint, which is a measure of how quickly the site actually loads. First input delay, which is a measure of how quickly the site becomes interactive and that a user can start to interact with the site. And then cumulative layout shift, which is just literally the amount of visual jitter that you get as a site loads. And ideally there should be none, just like when an app loads onto the screen. And so PWAs they aren't always fast because they have to be developed well. And so like Sonal said, the expertise around doing this is kind of percolating out into the industry. But just like you can build a slow traditional Magento site, you can certainly build a slow PWA if you do it poorly. But what we have seen with our recent launches is if we compare saltlife.com, for example, which is the example we have here, you guys can go to that, go to it on your desktop, go to it on your mobile device, download the icon to your home screen. And what you're going to see is just how incredibly fast the site is. And a lot of that is due to how WebScale has optimized the infrastructure that's behind that, and a lot of that is due to how Quora has coded that up and designed the architecture. But what we see, even comparing this to other Magento-based PWAs out in the market, is we can see on all of those core web vitals that we can do really, really well. And so as a result, these sites that are built well score very well and do very well from an SEO perspective. Next slide. Okay, so what does all of this give us? So all of those, that cool functionality that you can get and the fact that they're fast. Well, at the end of the day, we're trying to address what remains a problem in our industry, which is that even though mobile traffic, like Sonal said, is huge, and when you look globally, it's even higher than it is in the US and the Americas, but conversion rates on mobile, on shopping sites, are still very, very low. So Google, the most recent stat I saw was that well over 60% of traffic, e-commerce traffic now, is coming from mobile devices, but the conversion rate is far below that. So we're all leaving money on the table. And there's been a expedient excuse in the industry that, there's something about the mobile form factor that makes it hard to shop on. And I think that's a lazy attitude. I think we have to look at the actual customer experience, optimize it for mobile devices that really increase these conversion rates. And so you see these stats here. I'm sure everybody's seen similar stats to this. Basically, if a site is slow, people are going to leave and they're going to bounce to a competitor. And so, like Sonal said, when Google changed their search algorithms, there was sort of a rush for the exits of people suddenly becoming very interested in PWA, because this is a way of addressing that. So next slide. So I want to talk about how you actually do this. So Sonal and I are going to tag team a little bit here. So I'm going to talk about it from more of the software side of things, and then Sonal's going to come at it from the technology and the DevOps and the scaling side of things. So let's plunge in. I'm going to now tell you how Quora approached this market. So like I said, we are a very large Adobe Commerce systems integration solution partner. We've been with them since they shipped a commercial version, and we have built our business around Adobe Commerce over the last decade and a half. So there are different approaches in the market, and we looked at all of these. So PWA Studio is Adobe's, Magento's own architecture that they've put forth for how you would build get started with a PWA from Magento. And that's where we started, but we found that we needed to take that basic architecture and accelerate very rapidly beyond that. And so that's what we have done. But there's other solutions out there as well. There's other frameworks out there that sort of bring together all the pieces that you're going to need. So Vue is one that you hear a lot about. Vue actually got started for Magento 1 as a community project to try and enable a PWA solution for Magento 1 back before there was GraphQL or anything like that around Magento. And so they've continued to evolve that framework, Vue Storefront, and that's an open source framework that everyone can go take a look at. There's various Jamstack types of solutions out there. So Gatsby would be one of those that some people like to use. Really, if it's a very simple site that can just use statically generated pages, Gatsby might be a good solution there. Next, which is a framework for React, so a JavaScript framework for React. That's really the state of the art right now that the industry is settling on for a variety of reasons, some of which I'll touch on. And there's an open source reference storefront that you guys can start with that gets you partway towards a full featured site. You can build your own framework. That's what we did. And it took a lot of effort. And so I wouldn't recommend it at this point because there are options out there. We call what we did pilot. With that funky spelling there. It's not a product. It's not something that we license to clients or anything like that. It's just our code name for the tooling and the framework that we've assembled to make PWAs that perform like Salt Life did. So next slide. So why would you start with a framework instead of just building from scratch? Well, one of the things that you want to be looking for is that you would like to take the core e-commerce capabilities, so the things that in some ways are commoditized at this point that every merchant expects to have in their e-commerce site, and you want those to kind of come with the price of admission. So there should be a reference storefront, literally that is the PWA front end that's running, that has all of the features and functionality that a modern merchant would expect to be there. That's a lot of JavaScript that needs to be created in specifically as React components. That's kind of the building blocks of a PWA front end. You want a large library of those things. So when I think about the pilot framework, for example, we don't just have one mega menu, we have 5. We don't have one video carousel, we have 5. And so that allows merchants to kind of mix and match to build up a site and focus on the elements that allow them to really differentiate from their competition rather than having to start and build basic functionality. You want a services layer that actually can take whatever's in the back end. And Sonal mentioned it's not all or nothing here. So the Magento monolithic back end with its fully built out REST API and GraphQL layer, it can be treated, and which is exactly what we've done with Pilot, as a set of composable microservices. And this is really important because it allows you to add to the back end additional functionality, make changes and things like that. And I'm thinking about third-party extensions, other types of services that you might want to pop in. And so it's starting to think about things as microservices, even if under the hood they're not yet. Starting to think about that as an architecture becomes really important. For our community here and for Quora as a company, it was really important for us to maintain total compatibility with everything that Adobe is doing. We work really closely with the product team there, so we understand their roadmap so that we can maintain that compatibility with both where they are now and where they're heading as they continue to push forward into this headless and composable commerce space. And then finally, I just want to call out, I mentioned on the previous slide about maybe not trying to build your own. It took us several years to get here, and we had a dedicated R&D team that probably over the years added up to several $1 million of kind of retail value that we put into this. So there's no need at this point to start completely from scratch. I love to have conversations with people after the fact if you want to know more about that. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a very high level architectural diagram for Pilot, but as I said, this is not a product. It's not something that we're trying to compete with out in the market. It's just our way of getting going very quickly. It's something that we collaborated closely with WebScale on so that Pilot-based PWAs just perform really, really fast, like Salt Life and some of the other ones that we can talk about. But basically what this illustrates is a three-tier architecture where you have that storefront up at the top. That's your PWA. So that upper left box where it says pilot storefront, that is the PWA. That's all the React code. That's all of those components. It's the service workers. It's all the things that go into the presentation layer, the UI, the head in a headless architecture, however you want to think about that layer. But it's only one head. So you can have a native app. You can have IoT devices. You can have a point of sale system that's in the mix. Think about autonomous cars are going to become venues for shopping and so forth. So the number of heads is just going to proliferate, which is why thinking through the rest of the stack is so important. And so that requires a services layer or a piece of, a middleware stack, if you will, that can create what's called an API mesh. And this is something that, again, where the partnership with WebScale is so intertwined with what we're doing, because all of that routing from the front end, in order to keep the front end isolated from the back end, you have to have this API mesh that's handling all of the traffic, handling all of the mapping, doing all of the transformation that has to happen so that whatever is in the back end, that the front end can be isolated from that. We call that Pilot Edge in our world. It can be running on Amazon CloudFront. It can be running at WebScale. It could be running on Ambassador. There's various solutions. Our partnership with WebScale is where we're doing this, and so that we're very tightly intertwined with all of that. And then finally, there's what might be called a service mesh, or where you actually take what's in the back end. And so let's think about Magento. What does it do? It has catalog, it has products, it has customers, it has price, it has promotions. In Magento today, all of those things are tightly intertwined into a single application. But in this world where we've decoupled the front end from the back end, if you follow this type of architectural pattern, you can actually start to think of all of those things I just ticked off: price, catalog, customers, product, all of those things as discrete services. And alongside of those, you can bring in things like user-generated content from an extension, or Avalara for tax calculations. You can bring in a headless CMS like a Contentful or things like that. And so if you follow this architectural pattern, this is how you really take advantage of that headless, all the benefits of that headless approach to things. Next slide. Okay, so if you follow that pattern that I just talked about, where you really have a clean delineation between the front end and the back end, and you have that middleware layer and all of those pieces, you have now fully decoupled the front end from the back end. And so this gives you a whole bunch of interesting benefits. So one is the front end, you can really optimize that code. You can figure out how do you make the JavaScript bundles as small as you possibly can. It only has to worry about talking to a federated GraphQL layer that it only needs to know one version of, rather than this kind of multi-platform world that we traditionally have been in. It also allows for things like placing your compute loads where they make the most sense. So there are things that should be moved out to the network edge, to a CDN, something that WebScale might be providing. There's things where we can use server-side generation to improve performance, static site generation for pages like homepage and things that change very little, and then do as little as possible, frankly, on the client side via client-side rendering, so that we're not overtaxing the client-side browser. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Sonal now, who's actually going to talk about how you take all of that stuff that we've built in the lab and actually bring it out into the real world.
Thank you, Michael. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to be really sort of short in how we talk about these things, but the bottom line is the web scale technology stack is pre-integrated. So anything from performance to availability to security. I'm noticing some questions coming in about, is it less secure to go headless because all the piece parts are separated and they're talking to each other over APIs and so on and so forth? Think about it this way. The reason that that agencies like Cora work with us and the reason that merchants like Watsco work with us is peace of mind. We figured out all of those moving parts and we make it really easy. So if you think of the e-commerce technology stack, um, on the left-hand side of this diagram, you'll notice a monolithic application. The web scale technology stack is a combination of a very intelligent control plane that provides you with all of the insights and makes decisions on behalf of the application, whether it's the decision to scale out and provide additional infrastructure, or it's a decision to secure or manage some bots or rate limit certain traffic or anything that is needed to make that application just perform at its best, be secure from any challenge that comes at it, and make it highly available so that you can get that 100% uptime. WebScale's thought of it, deployed it in an easy to use format, and we provide you with an extensive white glove experience. So your merchant or you do not have to ever worry about it. And we focus on, it's e-commerce cloud hosting, it's e-commerce cloud delivery, it's headless delivery, it's delivery of the various components where we work with companies like View Storefront to make sure that that deployment happens seamlessly. We work with Pilot and Cora for the entire stack and make sure that works seamlessly and secure. So think of it as peace of mind, and that's what I would leave you with from the way that you think about it. On the right-hand side of the diagram, you've got a full microservices deployment where every component is separate, and this is truly a headless deployment, which is entirely API enabled. And these services will talk to each other, will talk to the front end, will talk to the back end, talk to the cart, and make decisions. That work has already been done. So you don't need to worry about how do I bring it all together. What you need to worry about as a developer or as an agency is how do I build it and how do I give our merchant and their customers the best experience possible, whether it's performance or security or availability or ease of use or app-like experience, and get it to market as quickly as possible without too much brain damage. Next slide. So this is the way that we enable headless deployments. And again, this is a sort of, zoom in to the slide that you saw previously. So any device type coming in through WebScale Cloud Edge, where, Michael was talking about the edge itself, and you have that flexibility. So you could go use AWS CloudFront directly. You could use Fastly directly. You could use a number of different components. This is how WebScale does it. And we look at it as we are the CDN, we are the security stack. We are the inherent load balancer, so we can make sure that your traffic is equally distributed across all the backend systems, and you have as much or as little infrastructure as you need to be, cost competitive as well as performance intensive and secure. We're a full function web application firewall. We provide bot protection. Again, peace of mind is what I would take away from this conversation. You can use a serverless deployment, and then using GraphQL as an API layer, and again, securely using GraphQL going into the backend across the various components that build up your site across any e-commerce platform. That's where we look at it. Like Michael mentioned, and their relationship with Adobe, I'd say about 60 to 70% of our customer base is some flavor of Magento. It's 1.x, 2.x, community, enterprise, and everything in between. We also have Shopify backends. We also have Magento Cloud backends. We have BigCommerce backends, and we work seamlessly across all of those with our Cloud Edge services or with our full stack cloud delivery. One of the news that you might have seen yesterday is we just were accepted into the MACH Alliance as an enabler along with AWS. That is critical, where you can understand that anybody who is building a MACH specific deployment, we are an enabler. Our technology stack has been approved as the one that makes it all come together and work seamlessly. Again, flexibility of commerce platform is key to what we do, but our focus and our love for Magento and everything in that ecosystem is at the forefront for everything that we want to enable. So keep that in mind. As we currently have close to 900 different logos and about 4,000 stores using different deployment models across the world, and it's really, really exciting. But this kind of shows you a zoomed in view of how it all comes together. Flexible delivery, again, I'll spend like 10 seconds on this. Starting from the left, it could be only Cloud Edge. So if you have a Shopify backend and all you want is a front end that enables things, or you have, similar to one of the case studies that Michael's going to show, all the way through to you want the progressive web app as a delivery model. You want a full stack, fully managed cloud experience. You're using Magento 2.4 or anything between. Or you want a complete solution, one bill, one throat to choke. We're all of the above. We can do just front end, we can do entire Commerce Cloud, and I don't want you to think that there's any restriction in how you work with WebScale. We believe in flexibility, and I think that's what Cora and WebScale like about each other is we challenge each other across our technology stack, and we bring flexibility to the entire solution. So it's a good partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, please, Neeta. So whether it's a cross deployment, and keep in mind, right, you can build a full stack solution, but how do you work with that full stack solution? So right from deployment and pushing that deployment using a simple DNS change, having everything routed through our setup, to then having full visibility to all traffic and allowing our agencies and our developer partners to have visibility into, whether it's identifying activity or security threats. It's not reactive, it's all proactive. 90% of our issues are resolved by the system because we do it through automation and technology. And then we have a full, L3, L2, L1, full acceleration. We have a large team that provides that white glove experience, and then ongoing management to just make sure we take care of all the technology challenges that you might have on the security side. Security is becoming, the more dollars that flow through commerce, the more security becomes an issue. And we are really the only choice to have that flexibility and control between the monoliths, between microservices, with sort of used to be that our first focus was availability because sites were falling down. Now availability is like table stakes, and so is performance. Now our full focus is security and making sure that, no WebScale merchant ever has any challenges on that front. Next slide. This is the most interesting part of what we're doing here. And Michael, I'll pass it over to you because this group of people really would be interested in this customer base and how you built what you built and how ecstatic these customers are with the experience they get.
Okay, great. So we'll just jump right ahead to the next slide. We wanted to feature one case study here. Just one quick comment on security. The way that a PWA, well-constructed PWA works is in many ways inherently more secure. So one piece is the standard requires them to use HTTPS, so there has to be a SSL certificate in the mix. But the other thing is by decoupling the head from the back end, you've really decreased the attack surface for a malicious actor, just because gaining access to the front end doesn't now automatically give you the keys to the entire kingdom. So we talked about Salt Life, which is I think the most recent launch that we did with WebScale. You can have a look at that one. The very first launch we did was for the #1 skincare brand in the UK, a company called Elemis. They're growing very, very quickly in the US as well. And they were one of these clients that came to us really focusing on speed as their key requirement. And then as we got into the project, realized they could, by taking advantage of some of those app-like capabilities, really create this very high-end, very luxurious user experience for their customers. And if you go to their site on mobile and you scroll maybe halfway down the homepage, you'll see just one cool little modal we created where you can swipe back and forth across the photo of a woman's face and see genuine before and after results and kind of everything in between there. So a lot of really cool things there. We launched this into the 2020 holiday season. So we've been at this for quite a while. And if you think about that slide Sonal had up about different deployment models, this is one where the Magento backend is running in the Magento cloud, and the PWA, the pilot-based PWA front end, is running in WebScale's environment. And so really leveraging the flexibility that this headless model provides. You can see down at the bottom there some of the stats. Some of these could be updated because we're now into year 2 with these guys. But what the industry sees, which is really interesting, is that because the customer experience that you can offer with the PWA is very rich, because they're fast and so forth, even without significant design changes, we're seeing conversion rate increases just due to the fact that the website is now a PWA. Vodafone did a really interesting experiment where they basically lifted and shifted a existing design to a PWA architecture, and then they started routing traffic between the two versions of the site, sort of the traditional monolithic architecture and the PWA version. And they saw, even without any significant design changes, something like a 25-30% increase in conversion rate. We're seeing similar stats kind of at the low end. We're seeing stats that look much more like this on the bottom of the slide as being much more typical for the merchants that we're working with. And so you can just see the increases in mobile traffic, in mobile conversions, in percentage of revenue to mobile and things like that. And so this is, I think we're close to a dozen PWA launches now, and we are seeing these kinds of stats for clients like this. And then if we go to our next slide. So this is where Sonal, you can kind of come in as well, where we really partnered very closely with WebScale to figure out what was the optimal type of environment for the PWA front end to really shine, so that we could achieve some of those results like what you saw on the previous slide.
Yeah, I think you nailed it already, Michael. It's, everything that we've talked about. I think it brings the best of all worlds. You've got Magento PWA Studio, you've got the GraphQL API, Magento backend, Cora's expertise in really making that front end shine with the pilot framework and WebScale delivery. I mean, what's not to like about everything coming together and a white glove experience? This is one happy customer.
Yeah. So you can take this, or I can take it, Sonal. I mean, hopefully we've made the case that the two firms really have a lot of shared expertise in this space and very close partnership. We've been working together just on PWA alone for, gosh, at least 18 months, I would say, right? Where we've been having regular calls and CTO to CTO and CEO to CEO and down the stack. And so if you're a merchant who is ready to take the plunge here, this is a very proven partnership that works really well.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I know the way that closely with Cora, there is appetite to work with other agencies as well, and Cora is a great partner. So other agencies that want to go to market with Cora, I think that is an opportunity as well with pilot.
Yeah, or go to market with WebScale.
Yeah, with WebScale, that's the point. It's not an exclusive relationship. We welcome everybody in this group to reach out either to WebScale or to Cora and find a way to enable the community, because if the community is pushing PWA as a go-to-market, I think it's really powerful for all of our combined customers. I didn't want to miss out on this announcement because I think it's this group of people. I didn't mean to put a plug in, because we've been talking so much about enabling the community for PWA. We just launched our WebScale Stratus in India. For all of you that are familiar with MageMojo and WebScale combined end of last year and went to market. We've added all of the fantastic work that the WebScale engineers have built on top of what was already brilliant with the MageMojo stack, which is now called WebScale Stratus. And we brought it to market in a new region in India. It's one of 3 regions that is going to come up. We had a number of customers already in the India market, so we expect some of them to move into delivering locally within the India region. And we also expect other customers and a lot of the developers that are on this group of people to reach out, and let's find a way to to build that stack, whether it's monolithic deployment or it's PWA headless, we can do it all. And there's a couple more regions coming soon. So there's a business plug for all of you. There's some PR out there and some data sheets on our website. And let you go enjoy those.
Yep, we're hiring.
I think we can't stop hiring. We've got so much need and so much desire for talent.
Yeah, it's. I would just echo some of the comments from the very start, which is that this is creating this technology rotation reminds me of the early days of the web, and so it is just getting going. It's going to be playing out for years, and there's a lot of opportunity that is being created for everyone in the ecosystem, whether you're a developer, a designer, a solution provider like Quora, a technology company like WebScale, and if you're a merchant looking to really modernize or deploy onto a modern stack that is as future-proof as anything can be in our space, this is a really exciting time to be here.
Absolutely. Neither, do we have time to do Q&A? Because I noticed there's 6 questions and all of them seem really interesting. I guess
So we do have a couple minutes left. We're at that 3-minute mark. So I'll start with the first question that came in. So is Pilot a proprietary framework?
The short answer there is no. So if someone were starting from scratch today to actually build out a framework for a headless PWA architecture, you would basically end up on the tech stack that, frankly, we and everyone else, including Magento and Shopify and all the commerce platforms are landing on, which is basically React for your JavaScript language that you're going to be using to build your front end, to actually build the PWA, GraphQL as the communications layer, and whatever is underneath that, whether it's REST or flat files or SOAP, doesn't really matter. You're going to be using the industry is moving pretty quickly towards using Next, which is a framework for React that allows for server-side rendering and really optimizing the performance there. So, and all of these are open source projects that are in many cases maintained and sponsored and contributed to by Google, by Facebook, by some very large organizations. So they're not going anywhere. Now, Pilot is not something that we have open sourced or intend to open source. So it's something that we use as our starting point. But in terms of the components that we're using and everything, it's all completely standards. It's the de facto standards that the industry has settled on.
Thank you. I know we are basically at time. What I'm going to do is jot down these questions, and if you have more questions, please reach out to Michael, to Sonal, to the Adobe team. We're here to help you. And first, I want to really thank you both, Michael, Sonal. Thank you so much for this presentation. I learned a lot. I feel like I want to know more about PWA and understand how it can help more of our Adobe Commerce merchants too. And then the next session is actually going to be on the stage. It's going to be the discussion panel for Magento open source. So all you have to do is click on the stage after this, after our session, and you'll be able to attend the discussion panel. All right. Well, I thank you both, and I thank everyone that attended, and hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.